Well, good afternoon, and a warm welcome to the second of our two special live webinars from Zero Waste Scotland on behalf of and in conjunction with the Scottish Government, who are at the moment running a 12-week public consultation on the introduction of market restrictions to certain single-use plastic items. So that's what we're here to talk about today. Now, my name's Andrew Pankhurst. I'm the Communications Programme Manager here at Zero Waste Scotland. And I'm delighted to welcome to the broadcast pair of my colleagues, so two Zero Waste Scotland staff members who are here to help us understand the potential impacts of the proposed changes that we're discussing, as well as answering any questions that you might have. So first up, we have Aurélie Tartot from our policy team. Afternoon, Aurélie.
Good afternoon, Andrew.
Thanks for joining us. We've also got David Barnes, who is the Programme Manager for the work that we're doing around the deposit return scheme and also extended producer responsibility, heading up the Single-Use Plastics Directive work at the moment as well. Afternoon, David. And we also have Andrew Forsyth, who is from Scottish Government. He is the Zero Waste Team Leader in the Scottish Government's Environmental Quality and Circular Economy Unit. Good afternoon to you, Andrew.
Good afternoon.
So, I suppose by way of introduction, we have all seen heart-wrenching images on the news, or perhaps we've even seen them with our own eyes, of marine animals and wildlife surrounded in the natural environment by plastic, entangled in plastic, being negatively affected by single-use plastics. So, you also don't need to go far to spot single-use items littering the areas that we live and work in right here in Scotland. And one of the biggest contributors to these issues is single-use items. And not only do they cause issues with litter, but single-use items also a big contributor to climate change. And that's probably the side of things that we talk about less, actually. But in fact, around 4/5 of Scotland's carbon footprint comes from material use. So from the goods that we produce, that we use, and quite often throw out after just one use. And across the EU, the most commonly found and problematic single-use items on beaches are plastic cutlery, plastic plates, straws, drink stirrers, and balloon sticks. And in Scotland as well, here it's not hard to find expanded polystyrene food containers, like the sort you get in the chippy, expanded polystyrene cups, which you often get like hot soup and things in, and other beverage containers, damaging our wildlife and our natural environment. So the Scottish Government is obviously proposing measures to tackle this, which includes restricting the availability of a lot of these items that I've been mentioning. And in order to engage with as many people, businesses and organisations as possible, we're hosting these webinars that are open to the public on behalf of the Scottish Government, and they're open to all, they're live across all of our social media channels and our website. And so we would like to have some interaction with the people out there. So if you're watching and tuning in, please do get in touch through the chat or through the comment section or through Twitter if you use the hashtag #MySayOnSingleUse. If you want to leave a comment, if you want to ask us a question, we will answer it here on this broadcast. So please do interact and get in touch. Now, we're going to have a quick initial chat to the panel in a minute, just to get a few words from each of them. But before we do, we have a kind of a video all about the Single-Use Plastics Directive that will give a good bit of introduction into what it's looking at and why, which we've been promoting across our social channels over the last few weeks to promote the consultation, but we're going to take a look at it just now as well.
Around 4/5 of Scotland's carbon footprint comes from the stuff we produce, use and throw out, often after just one use. As part of a wider package of measures to curb our throwaway culture, the Scottish Government is seeking your views on restricting the availability of certain single-use plastic items, such as cutlery and beverage stirrers. This would effectively mean banning them, just like Scotland has already done with plastic-stemmed cotton buds and microbeads. The items included to be banned as part of this consultation align Scotland with the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive, which would see additional measures come in on other single-use items at a later stage. So exactly which type of single-use plastic items are we talking about here? Well, it comes down to those which are most commonly found littered on beaches in Europe. And these are plates, cutlery, beverage stirrers, straws, expanded polystyrene food containers and cups with lids, balloon sticks, and all products made from oxo-degradable plastic. It's worth noting that the consultation includes plastics made from plant-based materials that are biodegradable or compostable. It also includes other single-use items containing plastics as well as other materials, for example, plastic-coated paper and plastic-lined cartons. Restricting access to single-use items such as these is essential if we want to tackle climate change and protect our oceans. The largest environmental benefits and carbon savings will only be achieved if we switch to reusable alternatives as much as possible, rather than simply switching one single-use material for another. You can have your say now. It couldn't be easier. Submit your views online and make them count towards this real opportunity to make a difference. Thank you.
All right, so quite a neat summary there from my colleague Catherine. Though, just to come over to you, David, could you perhaps summarise for us, in your view, what the issue here is and how the Scottish Government are proposing to tackle it?
Yeah, of course, Andrew, thank you. So, I mean, the main issue is the way that our economy works at the moment is we take material, we make it into products, and as you described earlier, we then often throw those products away. And that model of take, make, dispose has serious environmental implications. We've discussed the climate change impacts already, but it also has implications on things like biodiversity and the services that all of our ecosystems provide that we take these materials out of. And plastic is the most commonly used material in that single-use culture, and it has unique impacts when it leaks into our environment. The properties that make it so successful in terms of its flexibility and durability also mean that when it leaks into the marine environment, it causes real difficulties in terms of the impact on our wildlife and our lochs and seas. And the items that the Scottish Government are proposing to introduce market restrictions on are a source of that plastic which is leaking into our marine environment. They are the most commonly found on beaches. And so by restricting the plastic equivalents of these, there's a real opportunity for us to reduce the amount of plastic that's entering into the marine environment, but also encourage everyone to think about this as an opportunity to think differently and move away from single-use items altogether and adopt reusable items which will address all of the environmental impacts from that our single-use culture creates.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And I believe you touched on the concept of market restrictions there. Aurelie, I was just going to ask you, what do we actually mean by market restrictions, and what will that mean for single-use items? Will you still be able to buy them, or will that be restricted entirely?
Yeah, so you'll have seen the list of all the single-use items which will be covered by the restrictions in Catherine's video, and essentially these proposals would restrict the availability or the supply of these items. So it means that businesses would not be able to provide these items to customers in Scotland, and that would apply whether these items are given out for free or being charged for, and whether they're distributed online or on physical premises. As part of this consultation, the Scottish Government is also seeking views on whether these restrictions should cover the supply of non-commercial activities. So, for example, the supply by individuals in a personal capacity, and if those restrictions should also cover the manufacturing of these items in question.
Okay, so like it's going right down to the level of saying, I'm having a birthday party for my kids. These restrictions will mean I can't give out single-use plastic plates, for example.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. So, Andrew, just coming to you, obviously this is Scottish Government's consultation. Can you just give us a bit of a feel for what sort of questions you're asking as part of this consultation and who you're looking for responses from?
Yeah, of course. So I think the questions we're asking, I suppose, start with what's in the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive. So listing the items and asking, is this a problem in Scotland that we remove these from, as already said, from public life in different settings and accessibility? Is there anything that we've not thought about in terms of equality's impact, economic impact, or quite frankly, any other impacts that on a day-to-day basis? So I really encourage people, if there is something in this that really affects you or your business or your stakeholders or your personal life, then do respond to the consultation and tell us, because that's what we're looking for, is things to think about as we design regulations and put things in legislation that make sure that we're not doing anything with unintended consequences or it's going to disadvantage anyone. So I really welcome, I think, views from anyone, right from businesses, individuals, all different types of groups.
Yeah, well, it seems like we've got one vote of confidence already. On the live chat there, Jenny Campbell says, great news, and she's giving you a wee smiley face, Andrew. So that's one vote of confidence already. And you mentioned there talking to stakeholder organisations. Obviously, we've been working alongside stakeholder organisations that we work with to try and get the word out about this consultation and make sure as many people as possible respond. But in doing that, we've actually captured just some short video messages with some of our kind of stakeholder organisations that are quite close to the subject, just giving their view on the consultation and what they'd like to see happen.
Hi there, my name's Catherine and I'm the Scotland Conservation Officer for the Marine Conservation Society.
Hi, I'm Matt Woodthorpe, Scotland Programme Manager at EAUC.
Hello, my name's Rosie Jack and I'm the Market Events Manager at Bowhouse.
Together, we've seen a huge rise of litter that's been coming from our towns and our cities, through rivers and through our drain system, with much of it being single-use plastic. So items like this that are only used once and are now blighting our beaches and our environment.
EAUC is the Alliance for Sustainability Leadership in Education, and we exist to lead and empower the post-16 education sector to make sustainability just good business. In Scotland, our team is funded by the Scottish Funding Council, and we have the pleasure of working with every college and university in Scotland on sustainability. Although we can't readily identify the collective size of single-use plastic use across all of Scotland's colleges and universities, there have been proactive actions to reduce their use on campuses, which do give estimates of the scope of their use.
Balcaski Estate is a modern working estate in East Meath of Bank, and some of our missions are to be more sustainable and responsible and helping other businesses achieve those goals as well. And my role is to coordinate all of our events at Bowhouse and work with all the businesses that are based there. We've got over 7 food and drink businesses based in the converted farmsteading at Bowhouse, and they all do different things to do with food and drink.
With so much of this single-use plastic entering Scotland's seas, it's having a huge negative impact on our marine wildlife. A lot of our wildlife is now eating this single-use plastic, from the smallest plankton at the bottom of the food chain to our amazing iconic species like leatherback turtles and our whales, which are sadly dying as a result. Now, with so much of our marine wildlife eating this plastic, it might be no surprise that so much of it is entering the food chain, and the seafood that many of us enjoy to eat could be being negatively impacted as well.
In 2018, Dundee and Angus College stopped selling and supplying the use of all disposable plastic items, including cutlery, cups and bottled water. In one academic year alone, this removed approximately 140,000 disposable cups and nearly 20,000 plastic bottles from the plastic waste stream. Collectively, this was about 28 tonnes of plastic waste that was avoided.
So at our market weekends, at the events that we host, we see a lot of single-use, well, we have seen a lot of single-use plastic, and I think that was something that when we came to 2020, we were like, we need to start changing this, because after our market weekends and our events, obviously we've got all these big traders and businesses that come to Bull House, and they pitch up and they have their products in single-use plastic or single-use items.
Now, the power we all have as individual citizens cannot be underestimated. Thanks to all of you who collected data, that helped get the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive. And now we have the opportunity to make that data and make our voice heard right here, right now in Scotland.
Following on the great work of colleges like Dundee and Angus, many colleges and universities across Scotland are planning to or already have adopted measures to reduce the use of single-use plastics and other items on campuses. For example, earlier in the year, all of Scotland's college principals committed to removing single-use plastic beverage containers from their retail facilities. Colleges will also be exploring ways to replace other disposable items in the near future. We're also seeing institutions take leadership around disposable coffee cups. For example, the University of Dundee and the University of Stirling have charged in place for their use.
So at the beginning of 2020, we sort of said, look, this is going to be our mission, to try and cut back on that, really work with our traders, to try and show them different things they can use, or work with our customers to find out what they would prefer, what works for them when they take the product away home. So it's something that has really impacted our business, and we're always looking at improving on it.
The Scottish Government are currently running a public consultation asking you what you think they should do to tackle the single-use plastics crisis. We need to be moving away from a linear and throwaway society that has led to these unacceptable levels of litter blighting our beaches and impacting Scotland's seas. Our vision at the Marine Conservation Society is moving towards a circular and reusable society where litter disappears. And I know that'll be a vision that many of you will share.
Market restrictions on single-use plastic items can play a huge role in reducing their use and consequently also the negative impacts attributed to their production and the post-consumer journey. This has been clearly shown by the success of the plastic carrier bag charge, for example. But it is important to also recognise the social dimensions of single-use plastic items too. For example, individuals with a disability may require a single-use plastic item where current alternatives are not suitable for their needs.
It will give us as a business more of an oomph, that legislation that's coming into place. It will give us more of a stronghold to just say, actually, you know, it's not just us saying this now, it's the Scottish Government that are enforcing this. So we agree with them, and we think these single-use items shouldn't be used in our environment or our industry.
And finally, just to say, EUC Scotland will be taking part in the consultation, and we really recommend individuals, community groups and organisations take part too. It's important that your experiences and your ideas are heard.
I would really encourage all sorts of organisations, businesses, charities, groups to really sit down and think about it.
As you can probably tell, I absolutely love Scotland's beaches, I love my local park, my street, I love the city where I live. So I'll be making sure that my vision and my voice is heard by the Scottish Government, and you need to share your vision too. So take part in this public consultation and make sure that your vision is there for everyone to hear.
All right, nice one. We're back. So it's getting pretty lively on the chat. We're going to move to questions in a minute, but I just thought I'd say before that, thanks to everybody that sent those video contributions in, because they are really good. And I think if Catherine from the Marine Conservation Society's enthusiasm didn't convince you that you want to go and fill in this consultation, then nothing will. So if anyone is out there thinking, well, how would I do that? You would just go to zws.scot/single-use consultation, and that link will take you straight through to the particular page on the Scottish Government's consultations portal, where you can answer all the questions, or you actually don't have to answer them all. I think you can just answer the ones that you feel are relevant to you. So very lively on the chat. Let's take some questions. So the first one that I'm going to go to, because I think this is quite an interesting one to flag, is there's a couple of people actually. There's one that's just coming through in the chat and one that we had submitted before, asking why compostable items are included in this, which they are. And I think this is perhaps an opportunity to clear up to anyone watching some of the misconceptions that there are around compostables. Aurelia, just coming to you, why are compostables on this?
So that's a good question, Andrew. Single-use items made from biodegradable or compostable plastic are still single-use, and they're still discarded after one use. And there's still environmental impacts associated with plastics, which are biodegradable or compostable, when discarded into the natural environment. And there are challenges when they enter the waste management systems, such as getting mixed up with recyclable conventional plastics, or requiring specific temperatures and humidity levels, for instance, to be degraded in a reasonable amount of time. Or they often end up in landfill and being incinerated. So replacing these items with reusable alternatives that can be used for longer can reduce these impacts.
Yeah, because I mean they're very prevalent now. If you go to like summer events or anything like that around the country, you see a lot of these now, having replaced the traditional either polystyrene or single-use plastic ones. But my understanding is, maybe you can help me clear this up, but is that although technically they are compostable, they need a kind of industrial process in order for that to happen. And it's actually the facilities for that are quite rare, and the way that they're disposed of tends to make, like most of the time, that's not the outcome, that they're actually composted. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. They, as I said, they need specific parameters to be biodegrade or composted, and these facilities are not necessarily accessible. And when you get a drink from served in a compostable cup, you take it away with you, and you don't necessarily have the way to dispose of properly for it to be recycled in the right way. So they end up being incinerated or landfilled.
Yeah. Okay, and there was another question that came through as well, and I had mentioned when I introduced David that he was the manager of our forthcoming deposit return scheme for Scotland. So I'm going to chuck this one over to you, David, because someone's saying, well, why are plastic bottles not included in this? And I just wondered if you could explain what the proposed solution for plastic bottles is going to be.
Yeah, and I've seen some questions in the chat, Andrew, around about the Norway experience, and I think that links into this as well. That what the situation they're describing in Norway is that they have a deposit return scheme where people pay a small amount at the point where they purchase single-use containers at the shop, and then after they are finished with them, they return those containers for recycling, and they get that deposit back. They get a small amount of money back. The Scottish Government have actually passed regulations to introduce a deposit return scheme in Scotland, and that will become operational in 2022, covering not just PET plastic bottles, which is useful for the purposes of today's conversation, but also glass and metal cans as well. And so the deposit return scheme will have a huge impact on everyone in the country, encouraging everyone to recycle these single-use containers and create a closed-loop recycling for all of that material. and there will be a target for the organisation that runs that scheme to collect a minimum of 90%. So 90% of containers will be recycled through that scheme, and that compares to just over half just now. So that'll be a real step forward for Scotland's circular economy come 2022 as a result of the regulations that the Scottish Government passed earlier this year.
Yeah, because there is evidence, isn't there? I think I'm sure we looked at this as part of the process of implementing the deposit return scheme for Scotland, but in other countries where they have that, there is far fewer incidences of the items that are covered being littered.
Yes, I mean, the great thing about a deposit return scheme is that it places that financial incentive on the individual to really change their behaviour. If you happen to drop the bottle or throw that bottle away onto the street, then that directly affects you under a deposit scheme, because that means that the money that you've paid when you've purchased that drink is no longer available to you. So that really motivates people to change their behaviour, and that's why we think that we will get such high levels of return once the scheme's operational.
Yeah, someone pointed out in the chat actually, like, even if someone does decide that they're quite happy to forego their 20p or whatever it is, quite often you'll find in other countries that even if you're happy to let that 20p go, someone else isn't, so they'll pick it up and get their money back, and again, it's just helping to reduce litter overall. Andrew, I'm going to come to you with a question now. We've got a question from Edward Jones on Facebook. He's saying, hasn't this already been done in England last year? And I thought this might be a good opportunity to address that question, but also to give us a picture of to what extent this is happening across the UK and what the picture with other nations is.
Yeah, so down south in England, there have been some of these items already banned. So plastic stem cotton buds, which we've already done in Scotland, plastic drink stirrers, and single-use plastic straws. So part of the list that's in the directive has been already put in place in England. We're still waiting on confirmation when the rest of the list will be taken forward. In Wales, they've only a few weeks ago finished their consultation, similar to what we're doing on implementing Article 5 of the directive. So they hopefully will operate in a similar timescale to us in terms of getting regulations before Parliament. Obviously, we do have the small matter of elections next year, which will slightly delay the process, but we are looking for 2021 where this will come into force. So that there is wider work on this, and obviously it's an EU directive, so all member states across the EU are going through this process, or some have already gone through the process already.
Okay, great. We've got another few questions coming in here, or comments, questions. We've got one here from Jen P from Instagram. She says, 100% agree that we need to vastly reduce our reliance on single-use plastics, but we can't leave disabled people in the dust and completely ban them. I presume she's referring to, oh yeah, straws. Yeah, I've had some very eye-opening discussions about various needs for straws, and I've also had to use more single-use items as I'm currently recovering from brain surgery, including needing to use straws out and about when I wasn't at home. So, Aurelie, can you tell us, like, are there going to be any restrictions, exemptions for the restrictions around certain issues, like where people have a medical need for example, plastic straws?
Yeah, so that's a very good comment. So yes, the EU Single-Use Plastic Directive does allow for exemptions for people needing plastic straws for medical use, and so the Scottish Government recognises that certain single-use items perform a vital function, and they cannot be easily replaced with a more sustainable alternative. And these items can also provide crucial quality of life enhancing functions for disabled people. So, and this is particularly true for plastic straws. And part of the consultation process is to understand how access to these straws or items can be maintained for people who require them for medical use or to support independent living. And and while still satisfying the requirements of the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive. So yeah, we're going to engage with various groups to explore options or how this exemption could look like.
Okay, good. And Andrew, I think you said on the last webinar that we did that, in fact, that's kind of one of the real strengths of having a public consultation is issues like that, but also other issues that you might not even have considered. It's an opportunity for people to come forward with those.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we have in the consultation paper is, I suppose, the what. So, you know, what we plan to do. I think what we don't know on some of the things is the how. So this consultation process gives us that opportunity to absolutely to understand the practicalities of what it means for someone who needs a straw. And we recognise the real value in that, as I already said. And we want to make the exemption in a way in regulations that doesn't disadvantage those that need them or take away accessibility. But you know, it will probably remove plastic straws from, you know, someone's G&T in a pub once we're allowed to be in pubs again.
Yeah, because we've got a few people comments that came through last time, and people saying, "Look, I don't understand why we even need to consult on this. Just get on with it." But I think some of these questions are kind of throwing up the reasons why a public consultation is important. David, I'm going to ask this next sort of thing to you, obviously, because we're from an organisation that talks about circular economy. You can see it's written on the banner behind me. It's all about doing business in a way that it does things differently, so we're not having that impact on the planet. But we've got two very opposing views have come in across two questions. So let's check the name. So yeah, what's happening on Twitter is saying, what about all the jobs that we gain from making all that packaging? So they're sort of clearly throwing up a concern and saying, you know, what's happening to that industry that makes all this stuff? But then on the flip side of that, we've got from Aaron Smith 9, also on Twitter, how about instead of putting the blame onto us for plastic waste, go after the corporations and factories who make everything out of plastic? Is this a wayward idea? So on two sides there, someone's saying, well, what about the jobs that we'll lose? And someone's saying, look, this is the fault of the people that make it, so why not go after them? Now, what's your reaction to that from a kind of circular economy perspective?
Yeah, so I mean, taking the second viewpoint first, I think the purpose of these restrictions is that we have seen that it is too easy with these products on the market to make the wrong choice, that the way that our economy works doesn't encourage either individuals or businesses to get these items back so that they can be disposed of properly. And so introducing market restrictions like the Scottish Government's proposing through this consultation isn't something that's done lightly. In this instance, there is clearly a market failure. We can see that in our beaches and on our streets, as Catherine described in the video. And this offers a real opportunity to correct that while there being alternatives to these plastic items on the market. And that was part of the reason why they were identified in the Single-Use Plastics Directive, is that there are alternatives available, so it doesn't stop people doing the functions that these products deliver for them. I think that the point about the jobs and the economic impact of these types of measures is an important one, and the Scottish Government have to undertake an analysis called a business regulatory impact assessment. And as part of that, we look to identify where there are potential impacts on specific businesses or specific sectors as a result of these changes. But as you were kind of indicating there, Andrew, the point is that actually the move to a circular economy isn't about stopping business or shutting down opportunity. In fact, it's about creating new opportunities for people to take advantage of. And what we would encourage those businesses that are potentially involved in the manufacturing or distribution of the single-use plastic equivalents of these products is, are there opportunities to go into reusable versions and manufacture and distribute those? Is there opportunities to offer a service that creates a more ongoing relationship with your customers and offers an opportunity to bring more money into your business. And actually, that's what the idea of a circular economy does. It says, look, actually, we are in favour of creating new opportunities, new business opportunities for people to take advantage of, but it's about doing that in a way that minimises the negative environmental harm that's created by this take, make, dispose model that we've got just now.
Okay, thanks, David. We've got a question coming in the live chat there from Katrina Spink. She's asking, are you taking into account single use associated with construction, haulage, and of course, agricultural? Andrew, just going to throw that one to you, because obviously this consultation, the initial part, Article 5, is looking at the items that we've already talked about, but what plans does the government have to look at single-use items beyond those 10 items that we saw in the video?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think there's two parts to this. As you mentioned, this conversation is specifically on the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive, but there is a question or two in the consultation paper which says, what next? So it's asking, after these items are banned, what is the next batch of items that are harmful and that we feel could be banned? I think more broadly, we commissioned an expert panel, and they produced their report in September, which looked at single use more holistically, and it came up with 5 core principles. So I really recommend people look that up and read it, and it's really helpful as a policy maker, but also as a decision maker more broadly, just to look at things to say, well, is single use necessary? If not, then how do we consider alternative options? And I think that's where we need to be looking after this consultation, after regulations come into force, is what is the strategic picture in the short, medium, and long term on single use more broadly, and that's what we want to tackle. It's the throwaway culture, as we alluded to by Aurelie and David in their answers. We want to make sure that we are feeding material back into the circular economy, back into the system, and we aren't just throwing away valuable resources.
Yeah, well, perhaps actually if one of my behind the scenes colleagues could post a link to that EPICOM expert panel report in the chat, then people could click through and have a look, because it is a very good report. It's quite simple, and what it's saying actually is just a very sort of holistic system for saying let's avoid what we can, reuse where possible, and recycle where that's not possible. It's quite a good system. Another question from the chat, Kerry Ann Savage says, are we ending single-use plastic sanitary products? David, can you comment on that? Like, obviously, like the initial restrictions that we're discussing don't cover those, but was there not something about applicators or something in the stuff that's been looked at further down the line?
Yeah, so there's, as Andrew indicated just now, there is a question in the consultation, Kerry Ann, where we actually say, like, what other items should we be considering introducing market restrictions for? And the items that have been identified, so the ones that we are proposing through this consultation are seen on beaches across the European Union and are the most common across the European Union. There have been other products that have been identified that are specific to Scottish beaches, including wet wipes containing plastic and plastic tampon applicators. And so that's part of the question. Should we be approaching those next, or are there other products that we should be looking at market restrictions for, and not those? Maybe people disagree that those are an issue. And I think the other thing I would say is that it isn't just about the introduction of market restrictions. So what the Scottish Government are doing in this consultation is laying out, actually, so we're doing this batch of products. We're interested in people's views on any other products that would benefit from this type of market restriction. But actually, there are a range of other measures and policy measures that can be introduced to reduce single-use items, to make producers more accountable for what happens with those items, And the annex to the consultation actually outlines a whole series of measures that Scottish Government will be taking forward over the coming years, again aligning with our partners in the European Union to really drive down single-use plastic items across our economy.
Okay, I mean, it's interesting because one of the questions here, I think we're talking about that's over the long term, but one of the questions we had was, we need single-use items at this time to help reduce the spread of COVID. This is from Tracy YI on Twitter. She's saying medical equipment is often now single-use, such as tourniquets and so on. What is your view on that in terms of the need for single-use items to reduce the spread of COVID? Because I've seen like quite a lot of talk about this in the media in terms of, well, there's actually not a clear position on whether there's actually any additional threat of transferring the virus versus reusables, but that doesn't really seem to be something that people are too clear about.
Yeah, so I think the advice on how to avoid the transmission of COVID, the Scottish Government have said that actually maintaining social distancing by wearing face masks, they are the key measures that will prevent the spread of COVID. And in terms of like washing hands, and if you are using reusable items, making sure that those are washed at high temperature to kill off any of the virus that is on that. And that applies from everything from clothes that you wear right through to items that you would use to, like a coffee cup that you would use to buy coffee. What we want to do is, I think there's a recognition that single use has its place in situations like medical premises where you need single use bandages and things like that to protect people. It has genuine life-saving benefits. There's a reason why the Scottish Government aren't talking about single use disappearing altogether. But hopefully what everyone that's watching today will recognise is that the situation and the way that we manage our materials and we interact with products isn't single use, is restricted to those situations where there's absolutely no alternative or where it has those life-saving benefits. It's actually far more prevalent and is used in a way that is damaging our environment, is damaging our economy, and is damaging our country. And what these restrictions allow us to do is actually to say, for the specific product where it clearly is not required, you introduce market restrictions. And in the situation where it might be required, you look to introduce other measures that drive down use as far as possible. And in those situations where there's genuinely no other alternative, like medical facilities, then there's no proposals to take action on there, because in that situation it's genuinely required.
Okay, thanks, David. Colin Grieve posted a message of support, said great work guys earlier on in the chat, but he's also now asked a question which I was going to ask you to comment on, Andrew. He's saying, is education not the key to getting a closed loop country and leading to creating jobs, investment and infrastructure? I mean, that is important, isn't it, education on these issues?
Absolutely, and I think, as David alluded to, that the wider package of measures is in the annex to the consultation, one of which is awareness raising. And that's awareness raising both of reusable alternatives, but it's also awareness raising of, as I already touched on earlier, the correct disposal of an item, whether that item can be recycled. And so there's work there to be done on labelling and working with industry and producers to ensure that people understand what symbols mean, and working with local authorities around what waste streams are collected. So there's a whole wider picture here, absolutely, around education. And to be honest, I completely understand, and sometimes myself as a consumer, you can be very confused as to what the right thing to do is, and therefore absolutely an awareness raising piece of this puzzle is necessary and is on the horizon. I think with Zero Waste Scotland and the Scottish Government marketing campaign, going forward, that's where we need to put a lot of effort, and we will do, in terms of helping people understand what changes are coming in place where. We've already mentioned deposit return, on EPR, on potential charges, on potential bans. There's a lot in this space, and absolutely appreciate that people want to know how it's going to affect them, but they also want to know how to do the right thing, and that'll come through education in schools, but also through local authority messaging and more widely on social media as well. So we also recognise that this is something that people care about, and especially young people. The amount of correspondence we get at the Scottish Government from young people is really encouraging, in the sense that they are really concerned about single use. They are really concerned about what Catherine mentioned in her video around animals and beaches and litter, and they want to live in a place that hasn't got litter everywhere and go to beaches. And so we recognise that, especially before COVID, there was a real momentum around all this stuff. We really hope that behaviours and attitudes are going to be sustained to continue that momentum after this consultation.
Yeah, for anybody that actually is interested in the kind of education and skills development and job creation side of that, we just published on Zero Waste Scotland's website a week or so ago a study called The Future of Work, which is all about the circular economy potential for jobs and skills in Scotland. So it might be worth a look if you are interested in that kind of thing. I'm just looking through here. I think that might be all the questions that we've had in, and we are now at 3:45. So I think that is a really good time for us to say thank you. Oh, hang on. We'll just add one final one in. If people knew how much plastic they are at risk of consuming by eating seafood, they would soon think twice. So I agree, education is the key for everyone, says Sarah Ladat via the live chat. So very much agreeing with the points that Andrew was making there, I think, there about the importance of education. So thank you very much to everybody that has sent their questions in. Thank you to Catherine for her video. Thank you to our contributors from the stakeholder organisations, from the EAUC, Bow House and the Marine Conservation Society. Thank you, Aurélie, David and Andrew, for taking everybody's questions. And thanks to everybody that's tuned in and sent a question in as well. It's been a really good debate, a really good bit of engagement with people. And if you are interested in having your say and making your voice heard on the Single-Use Plastics Directive, then please go to zws.scot/single-use consultation, and that'll take you straight to the consultation website on the Scottish Government site, where you can read through all the questions and give your responses. So thank you very much to everybody that has been involved, and please do get in touch with us through our social media channels if there's anything that you didn't see covered today that you wanted to know the answer to. All right, thanks a lot.